March 5th. Mil Novation Oso dos, Los Angeles. Chateau Marmont Hotel, Bungalow 3. A woman knocked on the door. No answer. She knocked again. Still silence. Finally she opened the door, and what she saw inside froze her in place. John Belushi was lying at the edge of the bed, motionless, not breathing. He was 33 years old, the star of Saturday Night Live, Jake Blues from the Blues Brothers, America's favorite comedian. But that morning, John Belushi was dead. Official cause: speedball overdose, a mix of cocaine and heroin. But the real question was this: what happened in that bungalow that night? Who was there? And who gave John that final dose? Because John Belushi did not die alone. Before we uncover the final hours of comedy's brightest star, hit subscribe for more shocking Hollywood tragedies that were never meant to be told. John Adam Belushi was born on January 24, 1949 in Chicago, the son of Albanian immigrants. His father, Adam, ran a restaurant. His mother, Adam, was a homemaker. John was the oldest of 4 children. His childhood was ordinary. He grew up in Wheaton, Illinois, played football in high school, had an interest in music. But his real talent was comedy. He made everyone laugh in class, drove his teachers crazy. In 1967, he graduated high school, went to the College of DuPage, but he was never a serious student. The place he really belonged was Second City Theater, the famous comedy club in Chicago. By 1971, John had joined Second City's main cast. That's where he met Dan Aykroyd. The two clicked instantly. Same energy, same tempo, same madness. They performed together on stage, created characters. The Blues Brothers started during that time. In 1973, John married Judith Jacqueline. Everyone called her Judy. John loved her deeply. But the marriage was never easy, because John was uncontrollable. Then in 1975, the big break came. NBC was launching a new late-night show called Saturday Night Live. Producer Lorne Michaels called John and said, "I want you on my team." John accepted, moved to New York. And on October 11, 1975, SNL aired its first episode. John Belushi stood out immediately. The samurai character, the cheeseburger, sketch. Throughout that year, John became SNL's star. Nobody was as wild, as funny as he was. But at the same time, nobody was as undisciplined either. John didn't like rules. He would change sketches, improvise during live broadcasts. He wouldn't show up to rehearsals. Sometimes he'd arrive drunk, sometimes high. Lorne Michaels warned him repeatedly, "John, this can't continue. You need to be disciplined." John didn't listen. He'd say, "This is who I am. Take me as I am." But he still delivered brilliant performances. The audience loved him. In 1978, John left SNL. He wanted to focus on his film career. His first big movie, National Lampoon's Animal House, came out that year. John played Bluto. Food fights, drunk scenes, pure chaos. The film became a cult classic, made $141 million. John Belushi was no longer just a TV star. He was a movie star. But what America didn't see was the darkness growing behind the laughter. In 1980, The Blues Brothers was released. John starred alongside Dan Aykroyd. John and Dan played Jake and Elwood Blues. Black suits, sunglasses, blue cars. The film became legendary. The music, the dance sequences, the deadpan comedy. But the shoot was difficult. John was constantly using drugs. The set was chaotic. Director John Landis couldn't handle him. He said, "John is out of control." But the film came out, and it was a success. John seemed to be at his peak, but in reality, John was collapsing. His cocaine use increased. He tried heroin, never stopped drinking. Judy tried to save him. She'd say, "Go to rehab or you're going to die." John went, several times, but none of it worked. Because John believed he couldn't live without drugs anymore, that he couldn't be funny without them. Or at least that's what he thought. In 1981, Continental Divide was released. A romantic comedy. John wanted to try something different. But the film flopped. Audiences wanted to see John as Bluto. Nothing else. John was disappointed. He drank more, used more drugs. And then came the winter of 1982. The beginning of the end. In early 1982, John came to Los Angeles for a new film called Noble Rot. But the film was never made, because John was beyond control. He stayed at the Chateau Marmont. That bungalow was Hollywood's dark side. Drug dealers would come, parties would happen. John got lost there. The weeks dragged on. John barely slept, barely ate. Just cocaine, heroin, alcohol. His friends were worried. Dan Aykroyd called him and said, "Come home, John. You need help." John replied, "I'm fine. I'm working." But he wasn't working. He was dying. On the evening of March 4th, John was in Bungalow. 3 friends had stopped by. Robert De Niro came. Robin Williams dropped in. Everyone wanted to see John, but no one helped him. As the night went on, everyone left. Only John remained, and one woman, Kathy Smith. Kathy was a drug dealer. She'd known John for years. She'd bring him supplies. That night, Kathy gave John cocaine. Then heroin. John wanted both together. It was called a speedball. Cocaine lifts you up. Heroin calms you down. But it's extremely dangerous. Around 3 a.m., Kathy injected John with the final dose, and that was the moment everything ended. John lay down on the bed. Kathy stayed a bit longer. Then she left. When morning came, John's trainer Bill Wallace arrived at the bungalow. He knocked on the door. No answer. He went inside, found John on the bed. He called an ambulance, but it was too late. John Belushi was dead. The police arrived. The scene was chaotic. An overdose at Chateau Marmont, a dead comedy star. News spread fast. By noon, the entire world knew. John Belushi was gone. Judy was devastated. Dan Aykroyd was in shock. SNL went silent. America had lost its wildest, funniest voice. The autopsy results were announced. Cocaine and heroin overdose. Police asked who had been in the bungalow that night. Names came up: De Niro, Williams, Smith, but nobody talked. Everyone stayed silent. Eventually, Kathy Smith fled to Canada. She said, "Yes, I gave John that dose, the speedball, but he asked for it." When that interview came out, everyone was shocked. But the question remained, was Kathy Smith a murderer? Or was she just the last person in a long chain of enablers? The Los Angeles police brought Kathy Smith back. The trial dragged on. In the end, Kathy was found guilty of involuntary manslaughter. She served 15 months in prison. But the truth was, this Kathy was just one piece. The person who killed John was himself. Because John Belushi never learned to ask for help, never learned to say no, Hollywood surrounded him with yes-men. People who laughed at his jokes, brought him drugs, and never told him to stop. And in the end, John paid the price. John's funeral was held in Martha's Vineyard. His close friends came. Dan Aykroyd was there as a pallbearer. Judy was shattered. The headstone read, "Though I may be gone, rock and roll lives on." But the truth was, rock and roll lived on. John did not. After John Belushi's death, Hollywood changed. Drug use still existed, but it became more hidden. Dan Aykroyd never made another Blues Brothers film. He said, "I can't be Elwood without Jake." SNL continued without John. But it was never the same. And perhaps the saddest part was this: John believed he needed drugs to be funny. But the truth is, John was already funny, naturally talented. Drugs didn't make him funnier, they just killed him. Years later, Robin Williams would say, John's death taught me one thing: you can't outrun your demons. You have to face them. But John never learned that lesson. He ran until he couldn't run anymore. John Belushi was 33 years old when he died. He lived fast, burned bright, and left too soon. On stage, he was perfect. Off stage, he was lost. Maybe the greatest tragedy was this: John thought he needed to be high to make people laugh. But America loved him for who he was, not for what he took. And that's the truth. Hollywood never told him. John Belushi died in Bungalow 3 at the Chateau Marmont on March 5, 1982. The bungalow still exists. They say some guests refuse to stay there. They say they hear laughter at night. Wild, uncontrollable laughter. Maybe it's just the wind. Maybe it's the ghosts of Hollywood's past. Or maybe it's John, still performing, still trying to make people laugh. Even in death, he couldn't stop. Because that's who John Belushi was, a comedian to the very end.